Welcome to Draft Sickos on the No Ceilings NBA podcast feed and YouTube channel. I am Maxwell Stephen, and this is the show where we cover everybody from the biggest names to the deepest sleepers. And I'm joined by the real star of the show, Stephen Gillespie. Stephen, how are you today?
Maxwell, I'm tired, but I'm excited to be here. I just had a big weekend over at the Overtime Elite facilities.
Yeah, you did.
I watched 2 days worth of basketball, drove for probably 12 hours cumulatively throughout the weekend. But I'm excited, man. Like all of that, and I get to come here and record with you. I'm back, man. We're back. I'm energized. Let's hit it.
For sure. So on this one, we're going to do part two of the top incoming freshmen in this class. We may kind of touch on some guys real quick at the end, if you're cool with that, Stephen.
Yeah.
And then I know you had a question you want to throw out at the end that I felt like really had my gears turning quite a bit. So a lot of fun stuff there. We already did part one last week. So if you're like, these guys are doing top freshmen and they're not talking about Isaiah Collier and Justin Edwards, we did. Go back, check it out, give it a listen, give it a watch. But we're going to do part two today. So these are guys that are a little further down boards, but not that much further, especially in a year like this, where some of these guys, they'll be top 10 on some of these mainstream boards. And it's so fun because there's no consensus here. Some of these guys are like number 5 on some people's boards. So yeah, this is a really, really fun class. And we're going to kind of continue on. We're going to lead off with Elmarko Jackson. He is listed at 6'3", 200 pounds. He'll be playing at Kansas next year. A guy I got to see in person last year when he was playing on the Under Armour circuit. And even then, like, he was built like a man. Like, if you were going to be a traditional point guard size player, you would, back in the day, like on every UFC pay-per-view, they used to do this intro where Joe Rogan would say, if you built a fighter in a lab to beat Anderson Silva, like, they would look like this. If you built a point guard, traditional point guard size player to survive in the modern NBA, they would look like Elmarko Jackson. I think what's really interesting with him is that he has real athleticism. Like, there's burst, there's this north-south explosion, but he's still a guy that operates with pace. Like, there's still some hesitation and some creativity in terms of his setups. He is tough and strong against contact. Like, he is a guy that he plays the way his frame looks. Like, he's not one of those guys where, like, he's strong for no reason. Like, he knows how to attack and play physical going to the basket. I like how well he played against good competition, and he's always playing hard. Like, even if there's games where I'm not liking some of the things that he's doing, I'm never questioning whether or not he's given it everything he's got. I thought he looked very comfortable pulling up in the mid-range and beyond. Gets good elevation on his shot in the mid-range, which I think is really important when you're undersized. And he's really confident in those pull-ups. He'll take step backs, things like that. The three-point shot is a bit of a question mark with him. But we'll get to that a bit more in a second. The passing, I'm a little worried about. I think that he's capable, but not consistent. I think there are times where he throws some really frustrating passes, sometimes where he'll just kind of force the action a little bit too much, which is going to be a trend with a couple of these other guys too. I think where the shot settles off the catch is going to matter quite a bit with him. Because I think if you're going to be a point guard in the modern NBA, there needs to be that on-off component. The off-the-catch numbers have been okay, but the misses off the catch are all over the place. Like, if you just look at the form on the jumper, energy transfer form, everything like that is fine, but the misses are all over the place. They're left, they're right, they're short, they're long. It gives me some just kind of general accuracy and touch concerns. Defensively, I think he's good against other guards. Knows what to take away, where to force guys. Always plays hard on that side of the ball too, like even with the bigger offensive roles. So I think there's things like there. Has his lapses off the ball, kind of issues that you would expect given, just his age. Stuff all kind of guys struggle with. I'm a little bit lower on Elmarko than consensus, just because I have a hard time valuing this type of player going forward, and because of the issues that he has. If he's not really shooting it, that's been the big thing that we've seen with these young point guards that haven't panned out. Is it's usually been a shooting issue. And I think the decision making's got to be super steady now too, if you're going to be a 6'3" guard. So I think it's all attainable for him. Like, I think this is all stuff that's within, it's not like his flaw is something that he can't change. It's not like he's a horrible athlete or something like that. So I think it's fixable. But I'm more of like sorry about that. I think he's more of a like late lotto to like 20s kind of guy. But where are you at with Elmarko?
I'm even lower. And again, I'm going to be the old man shaking his fist at undersized guards, anyone who's not above that like 6'4" metric. And I'm already like annoyed at myself. So I could imagine if anybody like throughout the year hears me talk about these guards and they kind of feel in a similar manner. I get it, because I myself am frustrated at the way that I'm kind of approaching these guys, right? But I feel like there are concerns that come along with being his size, right? Maxwell, you touched on a lot of the great things, right? I love his speed. I love the handle. Plays within himself. Rarely ever does he feel rushed. Loves to get to the mid-range pull-up. Like, absolutely loves it. That is like his bread and butter, his favorite shot that he gets to. Hits it with regularity as well, right? Can hit on the lean, falling away, straight up, while taking that D-cell pull-up. Looks really good too. So all of that looks great. You mentioned very capable passer. That's literally what I have in my notes. I wrote that he likes to drive, throw the over-the-shoulder hook pass, can look his man open and hit a nice little dump pass. Turnovers come when he tries to be too saucy with the ball in his hands, right? Which you mentioned that happens a lot with Elmarko, right? Things that concern me. When I see a guard listed at 6'3", to me, that's like everybody, like a man saying that he's 6 foot and he's really like 5'10".
Mm-hmm.
Like no one wants to be 5'10". They want to be 6 foot, right? So
yeah,
that's kind of where
I think you're justifiably concerned there after seeing him in person. And he's young. Maybe he grew. This was, a year and 3 months ago now. But at the time, I did not think he was 6'3", for what that's worth.
And I think that's fair. I mean, that's why we go and see guys in person, right? That's a big advantage that comes with from watching behind a computer and going to see these guys live. Maxwell, we talk all the time about how rebounding rate is a really good indicator for pro level, even for guards, right? Even for point guards. He was 4th on his high school team in rebounding, which is kind of concerning to me. Shot only 31% from deep, but was just under 80% from the free throw line. So good touch indicators. Maybe the shot is coming along, but it's just an interesting kind of data point to go back and look at as we move forward. He was a negative assist turnover guy. Again, another concern if you're going to be the size that he's at. Negative forced turnovers to fouls committed guy. Another kind of concern on the defensive side of the ball, right? So I just see all these things. I'm a little bit skeptical. I love the sauce. I love the flair. I love the vision. I love the score. I love the scoring mindset. He's just going to have to kind of play up at the next level. But how do you feel about the Kansas commit for him?
I think it's fine. Like, I don't hate it. Like, there are some guys that I never want to throw anybody under the bus, but like some guys made school decisions for us. Like, what are you doing here? I can see it both ways. I think on one hand, because it is such a veteran laden team, he's not going to get to play like an ideal role right away. But I think what I like about it is that because they have veteran guards, like real veteran guards, between Nick Timberlake, who's going to be, I believe, 25, either during or shortly after the season, and DeJuan Harris. If it's not going well, he can at least get a little bit of balance where it's like maybe guys can make things a little bit easier for him. So I like it from that standpoint. He's not going to get to show off every single thing he can do, but at the same time, this team is really shallow. Like, there are like 9 scholarship players on this team or something like that. Like, it is not a deep team. So it's going to be really hard for him to fall out of the rotation. Like, there's really no downside given how shallow they are. So I think I ultimately kind of like it the more I talk through this.
I'm not worried about the depth. It's like, what's his role going to be on this team? Because I don't think that you're wanting Harris to be the floor spacer off of Elmarko. So I'm kind of curious to see if Elmarko is going to be kind of like the de facto scoring guard on this team, which Is that really what you want to kind of see from him moving forward? I don't know. I think I would kind of see him like to play off of others a little bit. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think that the school selection was pretty intriguing compared to other places he could have committed.
Spacing in general could be kind of nasty on this team. Like McCullough, KJ Adams, Dickinson will take like 1 or 2 a game. Like they're
going to be very good defensively.
They will be. They will be.
Yes.
As long as teams don't find ways to like isolate Hunter Dickinson. But
yeah.
But they can go small. Like this is a team I kind of trust to go small. But yeah. So where's Elmarko for you? Are you kind of more in that range where I am of like 14 to 22 feels a lot better than Lotto, or do you have him higher? You have him lower?
I think that's fair.
I don't think that's crazy. Whoa! All right.
Yeah. I mean, again, I have guards in spots where they're going to work their way up on the board for me. I don't recent draft history. I don't feel compelled to like start the year out with them being ridiculously high when they come in with all the concerns that come with guys at their position. Again, I know I hate myself. I know everyone is probably going to be tired of me by the end of the draft year, but I want to see guys work their way up at their position.
I think there's something. I was thinking about this to myself earlier, like 30 minutes ago, not that much earlier. Putting guards high feels high risk, moderate reward at this point. Like, how many guys are going to be Jalen Brunson? And Jalen Brunson spent 4 years in college. So that's like the thing. When you're putting these smaller guys really high, it's like, what are the odds that you draft them? It goes well to a truly meaningful level. And then you get a guy like a Brunson. And then even then, like, did you accidentally move off of them too early in today's NBA where like maybe they spend the first year in the G League because they're 19 and then year 2, maybe they don't play that much. And then maybe you throw them in a trade. Like there's just a lot. I don't know. There's a lot that can go wrong. And I don't know how patient teams are going to be with these kind of guys. Let's move on to the next guy because he's also a guard. I like this guy a lot. And I feel like I'm kind of going through a struggle with this guy, which we'll get to in a little bit. So Caleb Foster, who's going to be a freshman at Duke, 6'5", 200 pounds. This is a school choice I don't like. And I think I want to be clear. Like, I think John Shire is a fantastic coach. I think they did really well last year. I think the fact that they are retaining talent at such a high level speaks volumes that like they had 3 guys who could have maybe gone in the first round last year that all came back like the day after the season ended. And then they still got such a huge recruiting call. Like clearly guys want to play for John Shire. Like that is not
just got extended
a problem.
Too.
Yeah, I think Caleb Foster would have been better off going to a school where he was going to get a guaranteed role. And I think he could have gotten that role at a lot of schools. Yeah. I think Tyrese Proctor is obviously really good. I get like culture shock when I listen to college basketball podcasts and these guys will talk about Jeremy Roach as if he's like a god amongst men. And I'm like, I don't see him that way, but I think he's going to play a big role on this team. And then they get another guard who we'll get to later. So a lot of guys on this team. So that's kind of my concern, but I adore his game. He sees things really quickly, capitalizes immediately and makes stuff happen. His vision on the move is really nice. He's always under control. He's very clever as a passer, can dish with one hand, has shake with the ball in his hands and some wiggle to get to his spots. He's got some stop and go stuff. Like when he's at his best, I feel like I'm watching like a way less athletic Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in terms of just like, whoa, like how did he see that and how did he get there so efficiently? The shot looks nice. It's a nice release. It's quick. Sometimes it's a little bit low, but it looks good. And he's hit a high percentage of them. So we're dealing with a guy who's just like ultra high feel, has a way to score behind the 3-point line in the mid range. I think my concern with him is just the athleticism. I think he's fine, like north-south, and I think he's like a little shifty, but defensively, he just isn't nimble. Like he doesn't contain the ball. Part of it is I feel like he doesn't fight that hard on defense, but then part of me is also like, how much of that is also like your tools? Like if you're 6'5" or 6'4", even like at the lower levels, like you should still be able to contain these guys. And I don't think he does a great job of staying in front. And then offensively, like there are times where he'll try to get to his spots and just kind of get stuck, and he doesn't have like an extra acceleration gear or something that like Elmarko, like if he gets stuck, he can like kind of body his way through a guy or like find a way around him. Like Caleb Foster doesn't really have that gear, and then he also doesn't really get up well at the basket. And I'm leery of guys that can't produce on the interior. I think it's just really hard if you're going to be a guard and be like that perimeter oriented. But I think he can shoot. I really think he knows how to create and get to spots. I think the question is just like, how big of a role is he going to get, and how much of an issue is the athleticism? Is the athleticism something that like it makes it hard for him to contribute in the ACC, or is the athleticism something where it's like he'll be okay at the NBA level? Like, I really want to see what he looks like on a floor against just a bunch of other high level players. But I really like his feel for the game. Like when I watch him play, I feel like I'm constantly being outsmarted by him. And there's nothing I love to see more from a prospect than feeling like, wow, he was so many steps ahead of where I was. But yeah, just not that efficient inside the arc. But in EYBL play, 38% from three, 77% from the line. Like he's good. I like the shot. I like the creation.
Yeah, he's a very confident shooter, man. Like, very decisive. It doesn't take long for him to know whether he wants to go up with the shot or if he's going to attack, right? Which I really love that. I love as soon as you get, these 0.5 players, right? Like what are they going to do when they get the ball in their hand? You don't have to worry about a record scratch with him. He was a 38% three-point shooter at Team Thad, which was awesome to see, and he was also really good at the line. So no real concerns based on what you see on the film and based on what you see in the numbers that would suggest that he's not going to translate up as a decent shooter for Duke, right? You mentioned the competition within his own team that he's going to have to kind of overcome to get significant playing time. I don't know if he's highly enough regarded as a crew to say like a Livingston was last year, right? He didn't get a lot of play, didn't get a lot of burn, still found a way to get drafted onto a team. I don't know if Foster has that same level of pedigree. I think athletes typically get that type of head nod if they're that regarded. And you've already touched on it. The last thing that I have in my notes on him was a question is he a good athlete? I don't know. He's kind of like you said, a high feel, low twitch guy, which we've seen that flame out or do really well. So it's going to be interesting to see what he looks like at Duke. He has a little bit of shift to his game, but I don't think that he's like an omnidirectional type ball handler or anything like that. Usually just one quick move. Appears to be contact adverse. He does not like to get touched whenever he is trying to score the bucket, whether that's obviously a jumper. No jump shooter wants to get touched. But even when he's operating around the rim, when he's driving, he like does everything he can to like lean away to get the shot up, right? The defense concerns me though. The numbers, oddly enough, suggest like a really good defender, but watching
really?
Yeah, it was really funny. Like I went back to Synergy. Shout out to the folks over at Synergy. I went back and saw his numbers, and they were like, "Huh, okay, this is a guy that looks like he might be able to defend a little bit."
Yeah.
Then I put the film on, and he doesn't seem to be too aggressive at the point of attack. Plays the middle too much. Gets blown by pretty consistently. Doesn't really like to fight over screens. Plays with his hands down too often for me. Does do well in closeout, so I think that off-ball defender team concept stuff, there's a little bit to be excited about there, but I don't think there's anything glowing to speak of right now with his on-ball defense right now. But the rebounding we were talking about on Marco, Caleb's rebounding numbers were pretty solid too for his team, which is usually a good indication of scaling up. And again, is he a good athlete? I don't know, man, but I'm even lower on him. There's a lot of concerns as far as
I get it.
yeah, and again, I feel really good whenever we like agree on a player because I know that we kind of like see the game similar in a lot of ways, but we each have like our own little things that we're looking for. Like our scouting intangibles are a little bit different. But hearing you say that you like Foster and me thinking like, I'm not so sure. I feel like when we have these types of dudes, I have to go back and watch them again just to be like, I feel like I got to be messed up if Maxwell is higher on him and I'm not.
I appreciate that. That's a very, very nice sentiment to hear. And we've got a lot of guards on this episode just because like how the way our boards kind of shook out. Like we did sort of a tentative board for a project. And then this kind of the order of how we set this up sort of based on that. So we actually have another guard up next, one of Caleb Foster's teammates, Jared McCain. So this is one I think we might be a little bit different. I avoided looking at your notes in the file. So I am lower on McCain. I feel like everybody else is higher on McCain, and the intel on McCain is outstanding, to be completely clear. Like our guys at Summit, Hoop Summit, everything coming out of Duke is like, Jared McCain is a nasty little man. Like he is just very, very tough, very competitive, and plays with a ton of fire. I think the confidence and swagger like radiates off the screen in a really positive way with him. He is listed at 6'3", 200 pounds, another guy where he feels shorter than that to me. I think he can really shoot it. I think like he's a real deal shooter with range, off the catch, off the dribble. Like he'll pull up from NBA. Every shot he takes, he thinks it's going in. Lightning quick release. Offensively, I think he can do some pretty interesting stuff with his dribble. Like he's got some footwork to go along with that too. Has interesting ways of setting things up and getting to his spots. What I really like about his passing is he does need to limit his mistakes, like to be 100% clear. I think he gets all turnover prone. But I love the flashes with his passing. Like it almost kind of reminded me of Keontae George a little bit a year ago, where it's like, man, I like in like high school tape Keontae George, where it's like, man, sometimes I'm really unhappy with these mistakes, but the things that he does well and like the highlights, it's like, oh, the gears are turning in there. Like this is a guy who can make some high level reads, can really sling it with both hands out of the live dribble. And I think that the fact that he's able to do that just on the move, I do think there's a lot of upside to him is like a dual kind of shot maker creator. I do worry about how much he's going to pressure the rim, because he's another guy where I'm not like really sold on the athleticism. That's not really where he looks to go on the court. I like him defensively. I do think he's small. Like the 200-pound listing also feels like, I don't know. To me, I just didn't think of him as like 6'3", 200 when I was watching him. He felt like a small guard. He does know where to be, and he's really smart with his hands, and his timing is really good. Like the strips and digs and plays like that he's able to make, it feels like, oh, he saw that, he did it, he got the ball. It's very decisive, direct, quick. I just worry about the size with him a lot. Again, I know that we're kind of being repetitive on that front, but with McCain in particular, he doesn't feel long to me, and I worry that when he's on an NBA floor, teams are going to try and switch and mismatch him quite a bit. And I also just worry because like in EYBL play, he was under like 47% at the rim in the half court. So it's just like, he's really not going to pressure the rim. So if he's not going to pressure the rim, and where a guy like Keontae George had that like bowling ball body, that it's like, well, even if he doesn't get there and he's not the most vertical guy, like he's gonna find ways to get there. I'm not as sold on that with McCain, and I don't know that he has a way of like, well, guys are just gonna bounce off me like Keontae did to like overcome that hurdle. So like the shot making's got to be really great, and the passing has to actualize. So I see him more as like back end first round, early second. But again, like it's just the value proposition. Like it's moderate reward a lot of times on these guys, but because the intangible stuff is so potent, is so strong, and the reviews have been so great, maybe there's a chance that he does hit a higher level.
Yeah, so I have him 36th on my board, so I'm not like super duper high on him, but early second round. He turns 20 in February, so another member of the Grandpa Club coming in. Looks like Wolverine on the floor. He's kind of short, stocky. I do kind of buy the 200-pound listing for him, just because he's like almost as wide as he is tall to me, at least at the shoulder level, which is pretty nice to see. If you're gonna kind of be smaller, I want you to look like you can take the contact, right? He has nice soft touch on his floaters, very shifty. I think that he gets to his spots very well, has some crafty finishes in traffic. Not afraid to take it to the block and mix it up. There's a few times where I kind of saw him do the Andre Miller low post guard post up play, which I would love to see that have a revival within the game of basketball. Let's just get some point guard versus point guard post up play again. Nice shooting stroke, quick release, I wish the release point was a little bit higher, but it goes in at a decent rate. The pump fake also closely resembles the shot, which I think is very valuable. I trust him to make the right reads, man. Even though the advanced passing game isn't there, he's probably not going to hit you with like the Trey Young passing package. He makes the right reads and gets it there pretty well. I think that he can kind of struggle a little bit to thread the needle in those kind of like high risk, high reward passes. But again, very smart player, sees the floor pretty well. He does a nice job of sliding his feet on defense. I think he stays with his man really well. So if there are concerns on the offensive end defensively for his size, I think that he does enough to be like, oh, okay, I can buy into this guy a little bit more for his two-way ability. Does well denying his man with an easy catch away from the ball. The second effort is going to be something to monitor. Again, I think that might be a size thing. Decent athlete, not super zoomy or poppy, but he's not bereft in those areas either. I feel like, same kind of lather, rinse, repeat for the concerns that we have with guards of his size. I won't bore the readers and listeners and viewers anymore with that, but there are some things to be excited about, which is why I do kind of have him in that early second round range to where he could climb.
So let's just real quick before we go to our first break.
Okay.
Those three guards that we've discussed so far, how would you rank them?
I think I would go McCain, Elmarko, Caleb Foster.
I think we're on the same page. I am
Okay.
right there with you. So we're going to take a quick break. We've got another guard coming up after the break who is very interesting and very polarizing. We've got our first kind of forward in the mix. We've got another small guard that we can have some concerns about. So it's going to be a fun mix. These next three guys are very unique, very polarizing. So we'll be right back on the other side of the All right, let's talk Garway Dual, because Garway is one of those guys that like I don't think has appeared on an ESPN board. I think Sam Vecini's got him like 10. So it's one of those guys like depending on who you talk to, we were texting him the other day. He scares me, man. Like I just think this is one of these like I feel like I'm gonna get it wrong, and I'm still undecided which way I'm gonna get this one wrong. But
he might be the ultimate my guy in this draft. I think that the guys that are in, they're like 10 toes down, like wearing their lugs, dead ass. They are in on him. And then everybody else is just like, I don't know, so it's very polarizing indeed.
So Garway's he's gonna be at Providence. He is 6'5". His wingspan is out there. People say he has a 6'10" wingspan. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where that came from. It looks like it might be longer than 6'10" to me.
I'll buy that. Yeah.
He is very long and he is very athletic. The defense, I think I'm like not a guy who's like interested generally in prospects where it's like, well, his defense. I'm like, well, hold on. What is he gonna do on offense?
Yeah.
With Garway, you almost gotta lead with the defense because I think that's what can make him really special. He is an outstanding mover, got those long arms like we talked about, and has a real motor on it. Like he can make all sorts of plays, whether it's poking into a handle, getting, a dig, going up and contesting on the perimeter and blocking a three, weak side rim protection. It's all there with Garway. He's not the strongest at this point. Like I think he's listed at like 190. But he's a late growth spurt guy. He was playing JV basketball until like a year ago. Really, really kind of interesting developmental pathway. He gambles a little bit. I don't really care about guys with these kind of tools that gamble at this age. It's going to get refined. And if it doesn't, like, then he's just not going to play. So I tend to think guys figure that out. Back to the offensive side. He's really long. He's really athletic. He is very good at getting to his spots. Like he can play really low with his dribble. His misdirection is outstanding. Like the timing of his setups and the way that like he'll just freeze, look something off, and then attack in a direction that like his body didn't appear to be set up to go in that direction. Makes him really hard to track and stay in front of and telegraph. he has that timing and he has that pace, but like the explosion tools are absurd because he's got like these crazy long legs. He can get low, but like he's able to maximize pace better than most guys are, and just really get those advantages. When he does get him to, gets up so easy off of 1 foot. He's one of those guys when he jumps, it seems like he's just kind of floating in the air. He really hangs in the air when he gets up, likes contact, has no problem going to the free throw line. The touch on his floater is pretty soft. I also like that he appears to see the entire floor as a passer. Like there are times where he will make a bit more of an advanced read. So I think what we're looking at is plus defender, exceptional physical tools, really solid understanding of like pace, space, manipulation, how to bend a defense, and the ability to finish and get to the free throw line. I have no idea if he can shoot a basketball. None.
Yeah.
And because of like this late blooming development, like with the resources we have available, unfortunately, there's just like not a ton. I'm like, this is his free throw percentage. This is what he shoots off the catch. Like we just don't have a ton of data on it. I also do think he gets like really out of control at times. Like he is another like Max Lewis candidate where it's I caught the ball and I took 3 steps before I put it on the ground. I got called for a travel. Lot of forced interior passes where it's like, you know, I got all the way to the rim. I see the dump off man, and I don't really have an angle to get it to him, but I'm gonna try to get it to him, and then it leads to a turnover. I don't know what to do with him because I really like these tools, so I want to bet on him. So I'm probably gonna put him high, but I don't think it would shock me if he struggles this year, especially with the lack of an outside shot. And in fact, the Providence has like Resball pointed out in our chat, like some real clear lead dogs, like Devin Carter. You've got Bryce Hopkins. You're bringing over Josh Aduro too, who is like really good college basketball big man, a guy I saw in person, like guys just bounce off of. Like he is a massive physical human being. There might not be a huge role for him, and maybe he's just like a 6 man this year. Maybe he struggles with the efficiency. Maybe he comes back and he's one of these guys that blows it out of the water in year 2. I don't think there's any outcome that's off the table, but I think because what he has is so much more rare than the guys that we've talked about previously, just in terms of the tools, this is the type of guard I'm more excited about and willing to bet high on, because I do think the reward is pretty great because he is almost wing size, but is really good at a lot of this guard stuff still.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Maxwell. We were talking a lot about this guy when we were kind of sharing a little bit of our ideas. I do like how we kind of come to these, even though we like put our notes in a consolidated space, we really don't pay a lot of attention to what each other are writing until we come in here, right? So we're really learning a lot about how we feel about these guys as the listeners and the viewers are as well, which is pretty fun. I agree with a lot of the same things that you were saying, but one of the things that we did talk about that I would kind of like to bring to the forefront to the audience here is that I shared with you that guys that have the skills that he does, like even the physical tools, the things that they're great at now, they typically don't come out as freshmen, which is totally fine because when they do come out, they're usually like lottery level talents, right? So I would be totally okay if Garway was just like a sophomore knockout as opposed to trying to evaluate him to where he has to come out this year. I think the point that Rez and yourself have brought up about the pecking order, and Rez, to answer your question, like how does he stand out? I think it's pure hustle, right? Like cutting, getting reads off of guys like Hopkins and Carter, maybe even like setting screens, running some DHO actions to where the attention might be so focused on either one of those two to where you scramble, break, and you just make the most out of whatever look that you get when you're running an action with either one of those two guys. I think that's where it comes in. Also, defensively, I think that this guy's going to be a playmaker. I think he has the potential to be a very special defender, which makes him so intriguing. But again, I don't know if he can shoot. I know that he can pass. Maxwell, he looks like he's one of these guys that standing at 6'5", like how I said with Jacoby Walters, like the cup analogy. If 6'5" is a cup, his cup is spilling over. He's like 6'5" that 6'5" can get. I do like his handle. like you mentioned, he has a nice feel for the game, man. Has real keen ability to like get his teammates open. He's got all the physical tools that you could want. I need him to display some semblance of like me putting the ball in the hoop game. And I think that's where he's going to get the most bang for his buck. And it may not be this year. I still have him in my top 60. However, I do think that, forgive me for saying this, he could be a pre-draft candidate, right?
I
Like
think
one of
so.
you.
Like and I know we're both not like, just personally, like our draft philosophy, and if you are, we're not saying like you're wrong or you're stupid or anything like that. I think we're both kind of not pre-draft guys in general, just because the way I see it, at least, is that like the league tends to just move on from guys really fast, and
Exactly.
teams aren't patient, and they're not as like caring with their developmental resources on like guys that are second round picks. So if like you're pre-drafting a guy in the second, like the track record of those
And
guys panning
guys,
out is
they
really
want
bad. It's really bad.
and they want guys that can contribute now. Look at like the work, the piece that Kevin O'Connor did with Calvin Booth, right? Like these teams, they want guys who could come in and play right away. And look at what we're seeing with some of these other guys that are here today, gone tomorrow. Like Usman Garuba was the ultimate. Like if he gets like an increased developmental, amount of focus, this guy could be really scary. Teams aren't necessarily looking to pour all of that amount of attention onto these guys as much as we would like to see it happen. They're just not as quick to do it anymore.
Yeah, well, even like athletic guy, and I think, to be clear, I think Garway has like much better feel than these guys. But guys like Keon Johnson
Absolutely.
or like Greg Brown, where it was like, oh well, like they just have these awesome physical tools, so a team is going to like really spend time to maximize them. Like I don't want to throw Kai Jones into that because that's like a different can of worms. But like it doesn't always. Like the hit rate on it's just really low. Like without a requisite level of like feel and basketball skill, the hit rate is really low. I do think Garway is a guy that could be worth the squeeze because it feels like it's just the shot. Like it feels like, yeah, like the playmaking needs to be refined, but like the game tends to slow down for guys, and like he just has so much to offer that if he can shoot a pull up jumper and knock down a shot off the catch, like it's really easy. It's going to be easy for him to like get NBA minutes, even if you don't think, okay, well, he's going to have this all-star outcome or anything. Like there's a really clear path to him just being an effective backup, if nothing else.
And I think one thing that we don't talk about enough is the scouting community is like speed of game adjustment. I wonder if, because he's a frenetic athlete, right? Like he runs 100% or 100 miles an hour every time. But I wonder if like how his 100%, how he looks compared to higher level of competition, higher level of athleticism, the speed of that competition, how he handles all of that, because I do worry about like the touch around the basket consistency as well too. So there's enough offensive concerns scaling up that I do think that I'm not telling you right now in the preseason that he has no business getting drafted. Again, he's in my top 60, but I do definitely see a higher percentage of him being like I'm going to take a year to grow accustomed to it. Maybe the second half of the season, I show my potential. Guys are mocking me in the back half of the first. I can do better than that. Let me come back for a year and be a top 10 draft pick. Like, I think that's a very viable outcome.
For sure. And like, I hate to like be like, to be fair, and then give like the worst case outcome of a player, but I do think it's important. Like when we're saying like there are downside with prospects, and like Kadari Richmond was a guy a few years ago, right? He's not nearly as twitchy as Garway, but like he was a guy that people were like, you could pre-draft Kadari Richmond. Like that was like a common sentiment that like, well, he's so good at defense and he's so athletic. And like even if you're that, like even if you're an excellent defensive player and you're 6'5", 6'6" as a guard, and like you have these real creative playmaking chops, like if you can't put the ball in the basket efficiently, like NBA teams just really aren't interested. If you're not like 6'7", 6'8", and really strong and above, like if you're not hitting that threshold, teams just aren't as interested in developing that. Now Kadari's touch was like really bad. Like Kadari is really bad touch around the basket. So I think Garway has that over him. I think he's more athletic, but like if that's what it looks like at the college level, that's when you run into the situation where it's like, all right, well, maybe there's not as much here as we'd like. But I do think there are some really high level outcomes if the shot comes along.
Sure.
Up next, we've got Mackenzie Mgbako, who is in the headlines today. Just to address it real quick, the details on this are super weird, and like they're not plentiful. So he was arrested at Taco Bell for trespassing. It sounded like he was there. There were people there, but they were saying they were closed. There's all this stuff on Twitter about people saying that this Taco Bell always says they're closed during their what should be their operational hours. There's a lot going on. Right now. I don't really care to comment on it. I'm under no obligation to comment on
If
this
the
arrest.
worst thing that this guy has done is hold up a drive-through at a Taco, well, I got to choose. If he is staying in a Taco Bell drive-through, not holding it up like a like for robbery. No. But if he is just like hanging out in a Taco Bell drive-through, I think I probably should have been arrested for trespassing at a Taco Bell parking lot like several times in my life and just never happened.
Yeah, the details on it are really sparse. And then like the whole thing with like police like breaking his car window, but then like no mention of drugs, alcohol, like everything about it to me is just odd. So I don't want to comment on it because it just feels like there's a million ways this could go. And I
Absolutely.
What do you think of Mackenzie Mgbako as a basketball player?
Oh man, so typically, dude, he is the type of guy that I think I would fall for. And I'll tell you, upon the rewatch of this film, it aged better than my first go round with it. So I will tell you where I have him on my board right now, which is outside of my top 60, is out of date. I would probably slide him up closer to that second round frame. I know a lot of people like love him as a first round guy. I mean, he's to quote Sir Mix-a-Lot, he's long, strong, and down to get the friction on. He's not afraid of contact, sort of seeks it out a little bit. I like his shooting touch from a finishing and shooting standpoint. If he's not taking it off, or if he's not taking off from a runway, he can kind of get deterred and gets rejected more than I think the highlights of him doing really cool things would kind of lead you on to believe. Does make timely cuts. Curious if he can do much off of the bounce. I think that's going to be interesting to see how that scales up, especially at a place like Indiana. If he's pressured, how is he going to handle that? Would love to see him improve as a playmaker. I do like his tenacity and impact on the boards. When locked in, I think that he can be a really solid defender. I think that he is very strong and can be like a multifaceted front court defender. I would think based off of his offensive fluidity and aggression that he would be more assertive on the defensive end, and it just hasn't been there on the film to me. I think that he could be ultimately, though, one of these tools versus production type of players in high school, where I think, being bought in, especially going to a place like Indiana, and I'm sure that we'll talk about this a little bit, but I think they do preach the defensive side of the ball at an intense level. So I think that is going to be good for him. And again, we could talk more about the Indiana thing because I know that was a conversation that we had as well. But I'm curious to see what your independent or individual assessment of him would be.
Yeah, I like Mgbako a lot.
Okay.
6'8", 215. I like the size, and I think he's like a legit shot maker from mid range and beyond. The shot looks beautiful for how big he is, and I think he knows how to get shots too. Like I think he's going to be a guy who's willing to screen. He knows how to move and relocate and fill spaces on the perimeter to get himself those looks. I kind of like how tough he played around the basket at times too. I thought he, ate up contact pretty well, played strong through it. I feel like I see a lot of stuff about him being a bad athlete, and I don't really agree with that. I'm kind of with you.
Okay.
I think he moves a little bit better than like some people like some of the stuff I've seen written about him. I'm like, whoa, I don't quite agree with that. I think especially on the basket, he gets up pretty well. I think there is like 3-level scoring upside at 6'8", which is super, super valuable. Like that's, not you get his 3-level score at 6'8", you're cooking with something there. I think he sees the floor pretty well. I would say that would be like one of my worries is that if he's like a and what else guy where like he's just 6'8" and just scoring and that's it. Like I think he is a much more willing passer and sees the floor better than somebody like Johan Traore a year ago, where it's like, wow, this guy's like really tall and can really fill it up, but like he doesn't really do anything else. I think Mgbako is like ahead of a guy like that in terms of the other elements of his game. Defensively, I am with you. Like I think there's times where he'll, play a bigger guy and like hang really tough with him, or he'll play against a smaller guy and move his feet and he'll use his hands to get into their handle and things like that. Other times it's rough. Like he
Yeah.
will have his hands down too much. His energy will be low. He'll like close out very lazily. He'll be snoozing off the ball. Sometimes he just kind of looks lost. Like
Yeah.
I really don't know what to make of the defense because at times it feels like he could be capable and competent. The effort is very, very spotty to a point that I'm actually concerned about it, where most times, like, I really don't worry about defense too much with younger prospects, but he's the guy where I do worry that could be a problem just because it feels like he underachieves pretty significantly on that side of the ball. I kind of like him as a first round guy, because I do think he's capable, and if he can kind of get that coached into him this year, and then just display like the shot making, like it's just hard to find guys that are 6'8" and can score like he's able to. So I think if there's some development to the passing game and the defense, like that's a first round guy for me.
I think the handle is what really has me concerned because I do think like the shoot, like anybody will watch this guy and tell you, yes, okay, I agree that he can shoot, and maybe just him shooting at his size should be enough for me to be higher on him. But I just feel like the ball in hand stuff is a little concerning to me. You already touched on the playmaking and passing, the defensive lapses. I just think that I want to see him bring more to the table, and I feel like there are actually quite a few guys at his size within this class that do make it like kind of like attainable for him to be further down a board this year than probably otherwise because there are a lot of 6'8", 6'7", 6'9" guys that can do a good variety of things with the ball in their hand. And I have concerns, and maybe this is where we get into the Indiana commitment. Maxwell,
Hmm.
is Indiana have they done a good job of getting prospects and making them better?
No, not really, but I I don't want to kill him for that too much yet because it's still a
Yeah.
new-ish regime. Um, but I do think that's a fair question to ask. Like, what did Jalen Hood-Schifino show at Indiana that he didn't show in high school? Is like a fair question. And like, granted, he had some injuries and some stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think like what Malik Renault looks like this year will be like a telling
Yeah.
thing. What a guy like a Trey Galloway, who's been there for a couple years, like what he looks like will be interesting. Because Therese Jackson Davis just got like a little bit better at everything every year, but like never made a giant leap, like never added the outside jump shot. And it's hard to know, like, is that him or is that Indiana?
So the thing about TJD that stood out to me the most, especially coming into last year, was the leaps in playmaking that he's shown. But that wasn't an
Mhm.
Indiana thing. That was a private like trainer outside preparing for the NBA
Mm,
draft thing that he did. That wasn't like, oh my goodness, like Indiana really
yeah.
wanted to like make it a point to improve his ball handling playmaking skills. That was like I want to get into the NBA and I can't do it at the current skill set that I have. So that's all kind of like that's why I'm a little worried about Khalil Ware, who I'm sure we'll talk about in future episodes. But
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think the Indiana point that we had talked about before the show a couple days ago is a real concern that I have with Mackenzie as well.
I think what will work out for him on that front is that you're going to have Khalil Ware, you're going to have Malik Renault, you're going to have Xavier Johnson, who's like an established kind of vet point guard.
No
I
Tamar Bates, though. That sucks.
Yeah, no, Tamar Bates stinks. But I think he can kind of do similar stuff. I think Mgbako, if like the three carries over, and I think it will, he
Sure.
can just sort of be tertiary and be that 3-point shooter. And I understand your point about the handle. I think it's a good one. I agree. I don't love his handle. I don't know how much of a handle he needs to be like a good NBA player. Like I think
Yeah.
he's fine being like one dribble pull up, put it
Trey
on the floor
Murphy.
very briefly just to elevate over somebody in the mid-range. Yeah, like
Yeah.
way less athletic than Trey Murphy, obviously. But I,
Sure.
I think in terms of like how he uses his handle, it's the same kind of idea. So yeah, I think there is a chance that even with the concerns with Indiana, he can still get over the hump. Let's do our last kind of small guard of the episode, I believe.
Yeah.
Elliot Cadeau. Cadeau is a reclass who is going to North Carolina. He's been really exceptional at lower levels. 6'1", 175 pounds, so very tiny. He is willing to get a little bit physical downhill. He got to the rim like a decent amount at Link last year, but he was a very poor finisher there. He's a savvy pick and roll operator. He's got some wiggle. His handle is slick. Like he has a lot of ways to get himself space, and he sees a lot as a passer. He's just got a load of tricks to get defenders off balance. His stop start, his east-west stuff, it's all very good. I think he can shoot. He's really willing to shoot. He'll pull up from NBA at times. I do worry about him scoring in the mid-range because I think that's something like you really need if you're going to be like a Chris Paul kind of guy, is that mid-range pull-up game. He does not elevate very much at all in the mid-range. So I don't know how he is going to get shots there at a higher level. At rim, he can be creative, but like I said, the efficiency's not there. Defensively, another guy who's just really intelligent. He just reads and sees the game at a high level. Similar to McCain, really great with his hands. And I think that his just feel for the game and understanding of opposing offenses and what they're looking to do leads to him getting into a lot of passing lanes for steals. Because he is so short and so thin and has a hard time with screens, I worry a lot about not only who he guards, but just how exploitable he is. Because it's not even like, oh, he's a mismatch guy. It's like if you just set a pick on him anywhere on the court, he is out of the play. He can get stuff at the rim. He can settle for wide angles. Without his vertical pop, I worry a lot about how he scores anywhere than like behind the 3-point line. And I think he can really shoot. He's one of these guys, like some people have him like top 20. I know Sam Vecini like didn't even put him on his board and was just kind of like, I think it takes these guys a while. I'm closer to that. I'm closer to like deep second round. And like the feel is so nutty. And the handle is so slick and the passing is so creative that like, I do think there's a real chance he can overcome some of those barriers. I'm just not sure I want to be the guy that bets on it.
So this is interesting. Another thing where I think that we're at opposite ends of the of the spectrum here. And again, I've spent all episode talking about my size concerns and previous episodes and all that. I think, and again, I know that recent histories tells me that even though that guys can have exceptional feel for the game and passing skills to not fall in love with them translating up. But I think Cadeau has the stuff, man, to where he could be potentially someone who can buck the size concern. He's high usage traditional guard. Size is going to be the knock against him, but the feel is going to be the sell. Very good passer. Like maybe like the elite passer within this class. Can sell cross-court passes with these. Can looks guys open, slick bounce passer, very good lob passer, Nash dribble along the baseline to corner kicks, like a variety of ways that he can get guys the ball. Kind of high turnover numbers, but still a 2-to-1 assist turnover guy. So I think it's just a case of like the more you have the ball, the more likely you are to turn it over type thing. Shooting numbers are favorable, albeit not on like necessarily the highest of volume. I don't mind the motion, but it is a bit towards the shoulder on the load. So maybe you can kind of like relocate the release point and work with the energy transfer a little bit there. Decent at the rim for high school, I would say, but curious, like you said, Maxwell, to see how that transfer is moving up. I worry that the defense is going to be the major concern, obviously, with him, which puts all of the emphasis on his offense, which is very pass-centric. So recent history shows that if you're the point guard at his size and that's your game, the NBA isn't necessarily like beating down your door to sign you. That being said, I think that he has a chance to have a real look. He is not in my first round. He is in a very early second rounder, but I think that he has a lot of the intangible aspects, a lot of the feel for the game, he is a good enough shooter to where it might be worth taking him with a pretty decent draft pick this year.
All right. Well, we're going to go to a break. After this, we've got a couple intriguing big men We also have Bronny James, and then we've got one of my kind of sleeper deep cut guys that I'm a big fan of. So stay tuned. We got a lot of fun stuff still right ahead. All right, so we have got Aaron Bradshaw up next on the list. This is going to be a really tricky one. 7 feet tall, 215 pounds. At Kentucky this coming season. With Bradshaw, it appears as if there's a foot injury, I believe is what they're saying.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we're going to see him much. I don't know if we're going to see him at all. Tricky situation. Very interesting tools. Really fast end to end when the motor is running. Got that nice second jump. Moves really well for a guy who's as tall as he is. Knows how to protect the rim. I believe it was the McDonald's game. It was one of the All-American games. I think it was McDonald's where like he was playing hard and it was like, oh man, like I totally see it.
Yep.
Soft touch inside, has moments where even though he is as thin as he is, like he goes up stronger than you would expect him to. He has a jump shot. He doesn't always take a lot of threes, but like high percentage free throw shooter, can hit some tough ones in the mid range. Shot prep is really pretty. Like he looks really clean moving into his jump shot. The motor doesn't always run though. And there's times where he's really weak with the ball. The offensive awareness I put is shaky. And there's times where he'll make some really bad passing decisions or he'll force something that he absolutely shouldn't force. And then defensively, because he's so thin, he fouls around the basket a lot. He caves at his chest really easily when guys drive into him. I feel like this is a type of player that is theoretically really valuable. Bradshaw's a guy I have a hard time pinning down because I feel like every year we have a new guy where it's like, this is going to be the 3-and-D big. And like, if the motor isn't there, it's just really hard. Like there's aren't a lot of centers in the NBA that don't play hard all the time and still have good careers. And so many bigs come into college with a bad motor. Like that a lot of these, it's just kind of something that you learn over time. So it's not like a reason to just say, hey, this guy's not going to do it. I feel like he's probably too low on my board. I think I had him somewhere in the second. The foot injury scares me though. So it's just going to be a lot of like, what is actually going on with this foot? How serious is it? And then do we get to see him on the court at all this year? I'm confused by him. If somebody with multiple first takes him in the first, I think that's a good value play. I'd probably do that if I was a team that had multiple firsts. I'd love to get him to the back end of the first round. Where are you at with that with Bradshaw?
Yeah, I think, obviously long big man has some nice touch around the rim, shown the ability to be a really nasty finisher. Doesn't move as fluid as you would think since he is a little bit more slim, but I think that if he's not going to be fluid, he's got the frame that will obviously, I think, support some more mass there. Not contact adverse, but is impacted by contact, I think, more frequently than I would like to see. Strength will help with that as he fills out his frame. Shows a willingness to be a stretch big. He has a nice shot, good touch indications, has already shown the willingness to put the ball up, which is something that you have to have. Can be a little bit of a ball stopper. Does the catch and survey, which I don't like as a big man. Like catch at least 2 dribble handoff, dive to the rim, something. I don't like the catch and look around aspect of his game. Good rebounder. I think, again, strength can be even better. More stocks than fouls committed, which I don't know if that's an indication of skill or his commitment or competition, but it's still an interesting data point when looking at the resume. I also kind of wonder, like, did DJ Wagner benefit him more than high school, or is it the other way around? They're both going to Kentucky, so that's going to be an interesting thing to monitor moving forward. The injury with the big kind of scares me a little bit if that's already happening, but I don't know. I also feel pretty confident about Kyle Filipowski, so I don't know why I would be less confident in a guy like this. So I don't know, man. I think I'm low on the skill set right now coming in. I'm low on the size coming in as far as like weight. But that being said, I still think that he's got a lot of promise and potential to continue to get better. So like you, I have him kind of in the top half of my second round. Just a bummer, man, because Kentucky has just had these guys where will they, won't they, like all off season, and it's just kind of been a drag in anticipation for watching our number one draft prospect coming into the year, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So up next, we have another big man who's also kind of in that mystery man category, but for different reasons. While Bradshaw is kind of always front and center and playing at a big high school program, EYBL, whatever. Xavier Booker is like the opposite. Like there's just not a ton out there on him. He's 6'10". He's going to be at Michigan State next year. Tall, fluid, agile. Another one of these guys who can shoot the ball. Got a high release point. Is he also a lefty too?
Yep, in my notes, another lefty shooter. Even though it's big man, we have even more lefties.
Yeah, a lot of those this year. Shooting motion at times, like on the misses and the pull up in particular, he has that kind of like quick pullback, like Corey calls it the snake bite motion, where
Yeah,
it's just like you really back a little too quickly. Want to see that swan? Hold that exaggerated swan
yeah.
like it's
Get that gooseneck.
your second grade YMCA team coach, exactly, taking you through it. I think he can make some nice passes at times too.
Yeah.
I think that you're talking about a guy who is 6'10", can really get up, can like a high big catch radius, like could be a lob finisher, can stretch the
Mhm.
floor, maybe can orchestrate some stuff from the top of the key. I'm really intrigued with Xavier Booker. I also think just like defensively, he's going to be a guy that can, switch and be fine. I totally trust him in those situations because of how he moves and his instincts. I like him as a rim protector with his length, how well he gets up off the floor. Again, instincts are there in that sense too. He knows when to rotate around the rim and turn guys away. I don't know how much I like the Michigan State school choice for like any prospect because it just feels like some guys like don't get better there at all, and then like some guys are AJ Hogarth, where it's like, oh, he's like taking more threes and making them, and like same with free throws every single year. But it's just like
Yeah.
guys don't play sometimes. Like Izzo has his guys and he plays them a lot, and if Xavier Booker doesn't fit into that, I don't know how that's going to work out. But they've got Matty Sissoko. I do think you could play the two of them together, but this is just such
That's
an
gonna be
old
interesting.
team that
Mhm.
it's going to be tough for Izzo to say I'm going to throw this freshman out there. I worry about that with Xavier Booker, but
Mhm.
I'm really intrigued with the raw tools. I think there's a real argument for him over Bradshaw just because I think the motor is better and I think the feel is better. That while he might not have like that same kind of pedigree, I think there's I almost feel better about Booker.
It's funny, like, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I agree with you, but I do have Bradshaw ranked ahead of Booker, and I
Mhm.
think it is gonna be the opportunity cost, right? And maybe reevaluating that with, the injury to, uh, I'm blanking, Bradshaw,
Mhm.
with the injury to Bradshaw, maybe Booker is the guy that should be up higher, but like you mentioned, man, another lefty shooter, stretch big, like Bradshaw does need to fill out his frame, like the touch around the rim, and I do have in my notes also a second solid jump, which is really encouraging to see for a player of his size at his position. Some interesting positional ball handling is also in my notes, so again, was glad to see that with you. I trust his verticality a lot. I think that it's going to be very good for him there. Shows good defensive flashes, decent instincts, needs to be more consistent on that end. And that might be what kind of holds him back with the Spartans a little bit. That and the fact that they always seem like they're wanting to win a national championship, which nothing wrong with that. But like you mentioned, I was curious to see if you would touch on it. But the Sissoko Booker duo tandem pecking order
Mhm.
maybe? Like a is it gonna be a tandem or is it gonna be like a Clint Capella, Onyeka Okongwu type thing, but in college basketball,
Mhm.
you know? It's gonna be interesting to see how that dynamic works, but I do like Booker. I think there are some very interesting tools that he has, on both sides of the ball, but I'm just curious about the opportunity play for him at Michigan State.
For sure. Another guy that has these kind of similar concerns as far as opportunity is kind of my sleeper guy that I shoehorned in here, Taylor Bull Bowen at Florida State,
Yeah.
6'8", 210, big and long and real comfortable behind the arc. Another guy who's going to move and replace on the perimeter, got a good stroke. He has a little bit of passing feel to him where there are like moments where they could pass. And I'm like, all right, you're starting to put some things together. Really flies for blocks. I like his defensive instincts. He's one of those guys who's like that modern forward that's going to provide some weak side rim protection. He's going to do well against smaller players. I think the issues are, first off, the handle, like, really lacks a lot of polish. He's one of those guys that will put the ball on the floor and go nowhere with it. I don't love the decision making and processing when he puts it on the floor. It feels like I'm trying to get to the shot, or I'm just dribbling to dribble. Like, that kind of stuff really has to clean up. But I think at 6'8", he's a good athlete with really good physical tools that has that kind of 3-and-D profile. He's also going to run into what I call the Florida State conundrum, which is that Florida State every year somehow has 15 guys that all play 22.3 minutes per game. Like, it's just, they're so well coached, and like, guys do get better there. And like, everyone on that team is interesting. They've got like a bunch of guys that I'm like, there's like a top 100 argument for that guy. And like, that's it.
Sure.
Like, that's just what their team is now. So Taylor Bowen, I kind of like, is a guy who I think could have a huge year and sneak in there. I just don't know that he's like gonna play very much. And the feel is like a real issue. Like, it's behind where a guy like Taylor Hendricks was coming into the year. And given that he's a little bit smaller, maybe that will be an issue. But I think there's some things to like athletically and the shot and with the defense. So any thoughts on Bull Bowen?
Yeah, so in my notes, it's funny that I like how you put the Florida State conundrum, because further down my notes, it says that he is the typical Florida State player that has offensive limitations, can do a multitude of things on defense, and will play 12 minutes a game. Like, he's gonna be, he's gonna fit that mold to a T. He's absolutely huge, though, man. He's lower on my board than where you have him. I do like him as a long-term play, though. I think that he has a lot of intriguing tools. I like his off-ball feel. I do not like the ball handling and decision-making of where it is right now. Will be a nightmare for anyone, though, that he is assigned to defensively. I think that, again, he's going to be a multi-year guy. But he's a freshman that a lot of people should be aware of, man, because he could be at the last month of the season, he averaged XXXXX type of guy, right? So he could be one of these guys to where we talked about it earlier with Garway, that come sophomore year, like, he might be primed for a very big role. But if we're going to be fair, if we're comparing how Indiana is with prospects, like, Florida State, I think, does have a longer track record of producing guys like Patrick Williams and Dem Vassell, some of these guys that are getting contracts. Scotty Barnes, but there's also Matthew Cleveland was supposed to be a first-round pick, and now he is playing for Miami guy, right? So
Jalen Warley was another one where it was like highly touted recruit came in, just like.
So but that's the thing. That's the thing, is like, all these dudes are committing to this one university, and they're either going to the NBA or they're transferring somewhere else. Like, it's I don't know. He's a very interesting guy. I'm glad that you threw his name here in the mix. Again, long-term play for me, but I definitely see the vision with it.
So last guy we're going to go kind of in depth on, it's a guy that I had really high, and I kind of bumped him down, and then I went back into the film, and I am bumping him back up. I'm like, I love this guy. It's Bronny James. 6'4", 210. Again, like, if you're going to be a guard, like, Bronny's got the body that you want to see in a modern guard. He's really smart. He's really savvy. I like how he sees the game. He's creative and steady, doesn't fold against heavy pressure. I think he knows how to toy with the second level guy in a ball screen. And I think he can really shoot it. He can really shoot it off the catch. I think he's going to bring legit off-ball gravity and just offensive optionality to an NBA team in a backcourt. Can relocate and drain from NBA. Willing pull-up guy. The results aren't there yet on his pull-up shot, but given the improvements we've seen as a shooter from him, I do think he's going to get there. Defensively, he's a handful. Like, he works really hard. Excellent screen navigation. The fundamentals are outstanding. Again, stout frame. Here's my Bronny take. I feel like with Bronny, because he is very clearly not LeBron James, you always hear, like, well, he's pretty average athlete or whatever. I think he's way more athletic than he gets credit for, particularly like how he jumps off of 2 feet. Like, he is so potent off of 2 feet. I'm like
Yeah.
trying not to use swear words. That guy flies. He really
Yeah.
gets up off of 2 feet and had like really big block numbers anywhere I looked. I think Bronny is like exactly what I want in a modern point guard. And I think having
Sure.
that like pro pedigree, those resources, I get the health stuff, whatever. If he's playing, I imagine that's the best decision, that it's going to be fine. So I'm not really taking that into account. I like Bronny James as a basketball player a lot. And I would say he might be my favorite of the guards that we talked about, other than, I think he is both the safest and maybe the most talented of the guards we've talked about today.
I think that he probably I do like the safest bet. Again, he is in my early second. This is where if you've been listening and paying attention, a lot of these smaller guards reside in my early second because I want to see them prove their way up. And you mentioned the athleticism. I think that Bronny is definitely more of like your power athletic guard as opposed to like the electric, flashy, dazzling, like crazy leaper guy like an Amen Thompson. But he's very strong. I think if you ignore the name on the jersey and you watched him, you would still be impressed with him as a basketball player, right? Very strong, very smooth combo guard, good court awareness, makes the right plays, good shooting stroke, can hit from deep range. Shot very well from deep against the City Reapers at OTE last year against the Thompson twins. Was a very good shooter in that game. Good defender. I like his footwork, the strength again, looks good there. Worry about the versatility, though. I don't know if he can do anything other than be just like a really good backcourt defender, which still has good value, right? It's just not the 1 through 4 defender that everybody claims that they're going to be, right? It'll be interesting to monitor his play with a good USC backcourt, though, because with guys like Boogie there, Kobe Johnson's going to be handling the ball. There's some good talent on this USC team. I think that Bronny will play. Obviously, I don't think that he commits to USC if he doesn't expect to play, but I'm going to be curious to see what his role is there. I think that he can be very good in a complementary role, but I do think that he's got some juice to his game on the offensive side of the ball to where you'll probably see some really strong offensive outings from him at USC. So the health factor is there. I think that we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that, considering the cardiac scare that he had. But that being clear, him playing early, I think that he will he'll turn a lot of heads, dude. I think that he's an NBA talent easily.
Yep. So the question that you wanted to bring up, and I thought this is an interesting point because you've done some research on his past drafts and trends and things like that. So I'll kind of let you get into that.
Yeah, so the biggest thing, and you called back to one of the pieces that I wrote earlier on in the year was like shiny new toys and more, kind of like looking for different like categories in the draft over the past 6 draft classes, seeing what has been trending. And I was really wanted to dive into it in particular this year because this draft class is under fire. It's kind of reminiscent of the 2020 class, which we've already talked about a little bit at the beginning of this year, comparing the two. But the average number of freshmen that have been drafted in the first round over the past 6 draft classes have been about 13 freshmen, like give or take, obviously, but on average, it's about 13 freshmen. I have 2 questions for you, Maxwell. First off, how many freshmen do you have projected to be selected in the first round coming into this year?
I have 12 currently.
Okay, so that's below average. I have 10.
Yep. Okay.
Right. So, follow-up question. Do you think, because both of us obviously have a lower number than the average, do you think that has kind of like a significant factor into why this draft class has been under fire as to the talent level of it? Because usually new is better, less
Yeah.
new, less good type thing going on here.
I think that's a big part of it. I think the other part of it too is that I think maybe that number for me is also a little bit lower because we're not including guys like like some of the Ignite guys are technically like not freshmen or whatever. So maybe
Yeah.
like I will say I think the big difference is that there doesn't feel like there's going to be a guy that everyone's looking forward to watching in college basketball coming out of the gate, which was true last year also, but there's not, a Victor and a Scoot this year either. I think that is a part of it. I think the other thing is that there's just less consensus around who the freshmen are. Like our freshmen
Yeah.
are probably a lot different than most people's freshmen they're mocking in the first round. And I also think the last thing is that usually it feels like the mocks are so freshman heavy out of the gate. And
Yeah.
so I was like, well, it doesn't really turn out that way. And it's like, yeah, but I got to have this guy first round. I got to have this guy first round. And like everyone's mocks have like 25 freshmen in the first round. So I do think it's telling to an extent that like we're starting off the year being like 12 of them maybe. Normally it's like there's 20 freshmen mocked in the first round. So I think at this point in the cycle, it's a little disappointing to see that few in a mock.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you brought up the point that you did, that normally places are mocking so many freshmen within the first round. Last year, that was true, and the average remained about the same. Even scaling it down to this year compared to last year, obviously, like a class is brought in and a class falls out, right? But even last year, the number was around 13, and we saw that so many places had above average number of freshmen being taken in the first round. And that's why it's called an average, right? Some years are going to have more freshmen in it. But it's funny that this year, how many outlets are right around that 13 number at the beginning of the season. So I think that it is a real sobering look. And like you said, it's going to make for a great evaluation this year. A lot of places are going to have to earn their paycheck this year, looking and seeing like who they like, who grows, who stands out, and again, who they kind of touted as the guys coming into the year and how that scales out throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really interesting. The last thing I want to throw at you real quick is just like, who are some other freshmen that you could see kind of crashing the party? I know we're both a big Cohen Carr guy.
Oh man,
Cohen Carr is someone that we got somebody cooking up some Cohen Carr stuff behind the scenes, but he's like my kind of like pre-draft guy in this class. Where I feel like if he plays and he's okay, I would want to draft him just because there's so many guys that like can't do the things he can do physically. And I think he has some passing feel too, that like if he
can shoot,
that's the thing is like if the shot looks okay at Michigan State, it's going to be hard for me to not want to just draft him.
Yeah.
Do you have other like freshmen that you've been like, ooh, this guy's kind of interesting? Brandon Garrison is my other one from Oklahoma State, where like I feel like he could be like a better Oso Ighodaro, which maybe that's a little ambitious, but I feel like he's in that same mold. But I feel like I like how he moves a little bit better. I think there's probably a better chance he ends up shooting it because he's on the younger side, but he's a guy that I think is going to play right away and could maybe surprise some people.
Yeah, so real quick on Cohen, I actually have him 20th on my board. I think that one thing that we are already seeing with the Thompson twins is like elite athleticism is kind of back in how it translates into the NBA. And Cohen, I think, is gonna be like a top 1% athlete in this class. Like it's already out there. Like I had him 20 before the dunk came out that like kind of circulated Twitter X or whatever.
He's done that dunk before though too.
Yeah. We're talking like double pump clutch from the free throw line off of 1 foot. Like it's insane. He's been in dunk contests, but the thing that stands out to me about him is like the willingness to cut. He's another lefty, but also even though the shot isn't the most beautiful, it goes in. So he has like kind of scary feel for the game already for someone as young as he is with the athleticism that he has. I'll give you 2 freshmen though that I kind of like. One of them I've interviewed and I'm going to have work come out. Not this upcoming Tuesday, but the following. Jaden Ross from UConn. Really big fan of him. Late growth spurt guy, this year type of guy, Maxwell, where he started his high school career at 5'8" and is now 6'7". So he has kind of that guard skill set and a very good shooter. And then I kind of like Jaron Stevenson, Alabama, a lot for he's kind of like my Taylor Bowen. But for me, I like Jaron a lot. I think he's a multifaceted defender, kind of sneaky, good offensive game. There's some other freshmen, but I'll throw those 2 out there.
Yeah, I think on the guard front, it feels like there's a lot. Like I feel like Miles Colvin has become like a hot name.
Yeah.
He's the guy I saw in person, and like it was like the slipperiest court I've ever seen. I know a lot of people are like, oh yeah, the courts get slippery sometimes. Hey, Dude, they could have played this game on an ice rink and it would have been any different. It was the worst court I've ever seen a game played on. And I thought he still looked really impressive. Deshaun Harris-Smith,
Yeah.
Maryland, all of Maryland's guards I like a lot, but I think he's the one that I think is kind of most poised because he's got the size, he can shoot, and the feel is really good. There was one other guard that I was thinking about the other day that I was like, that guy actually has a shot. Well,
I'm pulling my board up now because now I'm interested to see who else I have. No, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
Who else? Let me see. Let's do some bad podcasting and have some dead space.
Yeah.
Oh, Michael
Wesley Yates
Bell,
is
a
fun.
guy that you
we love
for
Michael
VC.
Bell. Yeah,
Yeah.
Michael Bell's gonna be at VCU.
I like
He's
Michael Bell.
he played in a Espoir. The numbers were similar to Coulibaly. So I heard that he looked pretty good in one of their scrimmages the other day. I'm putting him top 60. I'm doing it. I don't care.
Oh boy. He's in my top 60.
You get guys, you get guys that are that big that can just make plays like that. I'm buying.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Who else do I like? Oh, the Bewleys from Chicago State. I'm kind of like sneaky curious to see what they look like. That's gonna be a fun squad, dude.
I think that there was a big debate on like one of the I'm a big list user on Twitter, and a lot of my favorite like college basketball, like mid-major sicko accounts were all debating like how many games did Chicago State have to win to make the NCAA tournament. It was so fun. I'm lower on the Bewleys just because I don't think they can shoot at all. But I think like for the kind of teams that Chicago State will be playing for the most part, they're going to be so athletic that like
they're going to overwhelm people.
Like they're going to be really good college players. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that does it. So let's talk about what we have coming out this week. So I'm gonna do mine first because Steven's got a big one. So I want to save Steven's because what Steven cooked up is awesome. So I got a piece coming out. It'll be out by the time you're listening to this on sophomores who could step up. So like you got guys like Terrence Arsenault, Ryan Dunn that are on these mock drafts. We're like really anticipating big years from them that like aren't, they didn't have the biggest freshman seasons, but people think the leap is coming. Me being the sicko that I am, I took it a little bit different of a direction. Like guys that had those like kind of quiet sophomore years, but were highly touted that I think could explode that nobody's really predicting to explode. So I wrote about guys like Terrace Reed, Javon Porter, Roddy Gale, Rylan Griffin, and Dylan Andrews are the 5 that I kind of settled on for the column. Had a really fun time with it too. Those guys are top 60 for me. So go check that out, find out who those guys are. And then we will, So that's a fun one. But Steven, I am so excited for your stuff this week. Let people know what you've got cooking.
I can't gloss over Javon Porter top 60. We're gonna have to talk about that.
Oh, he's not. No. I said 2 of those guys are top 60.
Oh, I thought you said all of them. I was like, all right, whoa.
Now it sounds like I'm really dumping on Javon Porter. Javon Porter is not top 60 for me. Javon Porter is not. Yeah, I went in order of how I wrote the column, but
gotcha.
Javon Porter is not in my top 60.
Okay, I'm glad that because that's what I heard. Hopefully, if someone else heard that, we got the clarification there. So a really big interview piece coming out this upcoming Tuesday, and there will be like an accompanying video interview that's going to come out as well. I was able to get some time with Trent Flowers of the Adelaide 36ers. Shout out to Liam Santamaria for being so gracious after we interviewed him. And Maxwell, just real quick, that was probably my favorite thing that I've ever done since entering Detroit. It was just incredible. No. It was good. Like we're both just like fawning over how awesome it was. We even talked about it the other day.
Yeah, it was just such a cool experience, and I think it's a really important piece. Like there's not a lot of, I don't know, like we get to do a lot of cool things with no ceilings, but there are very few things that I like more than when I did something. I was like, I felt like that was important. Like I think it's important to take a look at how the NBL is functioning and like what they're doing, because it's only going to keep growing and becoming more prominent. So if you haven't listened to or watched the interview that we did with Liam Santamaria, I think you owe it to yourself to do so, because I think it's really critical to understand, like we said, how the sausage is made as far as what's going on in the NBL.
It's already made me a better evaluator and like things to consider when I'm watching these guys. And it actually helped me from Trenton Flowers piece that I'm writing, which is going to be it's going to be different. It's going to be like strictly interview style. Normally the way I've done these, it's like going to be interview and then a film breakdown. I'm going to kind of get the film breakdown later with Trenton because I think that, might be able to do some more stuff with him down the line. But in the interview piece, I'm really talking about, like, he was very honest. You know, he is very clear that the season hasn't started the way that maybe he wanted it to. But in talking with him and the prior examples of NBL players that have come through, and kind of the example that they have laid, the groundwork they had laid, and what he wanted, you know, one of the things that he talked about, because he was supposed to play in college, ended up playing in the NBL. The thing that he has always harped on, he did this before even talking with me, is that he wanted to get that decision correct, you know, because you only get to make your first decision one time. So when talking with him about the NBL, his decision to do that, I was able to talk to him after that big performance that he had, where he was 5 of 5 from 3, caught fire in the fourth quarter. We talked about all of that, how big of an uplift that was for him. And in this piece, I'm obviously going to be including excerpts from that interview, but also kind of talking about how hard it is to succeed, especially early in the NBL. And again, talking with Liam shed some light on that. Talking with Trenton has even magnified the intensity of that light. And if you look at some of the guys who were drafted through the NBL, like a Ousmane Dieng, like a Josh Giddey, some of these guys, it took them several games before they got comfortable playing a completely different style of basketball that is the NBL, and what we can expect moving forward from a guy like Trenton. So that piece is going to be there. It's also going to include some, I was actually talked to a guy from the OTE, Adam Omadouche, who is going to be a class of 2026 guy. He's going to be kind of my mouthpiece for my weekend that I had at OTE. So talking with him in terms of preparations for the weekend and the teams that they place, and some quick hits on some of the players, is going to be on the back end of that interview piece. So jam-packed Tuesday for me. Really excited about it, and really looking forward to seeing what everybody thinks about it.
For sure. All right. Well, thank you so much all for joining us. We really appreciate it. Make sure you're following Twitter, Stephen on Twitter /X at Stephen G Hoops. I'm on Twitter at Boundboards, and make sure you're subscribed to No Slings NBA. The Substack, NoSlingsNBA.com. We got a big announcement coming out very soon. More announcements. Yes, we've got more announcements. We got some really big things cooking. Make sure you're following at No Slings NBA on Twitter, and make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. So make sure you're following us everywhere. We appreciate you guys joining us. Sickos, have a great rest of your night.
Much love, y'all.